laundering networks. Indeed, to combat the exploitation of virtual currencies that are often used for payment in ransomware, the U.S. Treasury has also been leading international efforts, including driving development and adoption of virtual asset standards under the Financial Action Task Force. With those updates, I welcome your questions. Turning it over to Jen and Liz. Thank you for your time today.
Okay, Amr, kick us off.
Thanks. Just to clarify something, has Colonial paid any ransom, and has there been any advice on that? And then, secondly, is there any timeline for when Americans should be certain that this is going to be taken care of? People are getting ready. Memorial Day is not that far away, and everyone's concerned about the gas prices. What's the timeline on when this thing is going to be under control?
Absolutely. I'll speak to the first, and then I'll turn it to my colleague Liz for the second. So first, we recognize that victims of cyber attacks often face a very difficult situation, and they have to just balance often the cost-benefit when they have no choice with regard to paying a ransom. Colonial is a private company and will defer information regarding their decision on paying a ransom to them.
Would the administration offer any advice on whether or not to pay a ransom?
So typically that is a private sector decision, and the administration has not offered further advice at this time. Given the rise in ransomware, that is one area we're definitely looking at now to say what should be the government's approach to ransomware actors and to ransoms overall. Liz?
So on the issue of gas prices, as I indicated, right now there are no supply disruptions, and the Department of Energy's Information Agency, the EIA, is doing the analysis right now about potential supply disruptions and what price effects that could have. And we're working with other agencies to consider how, if necessary, we can move supplies to a place where it might be needed if it turns out that there is a shortfall.
India?
Thank you, Jen. My question is just to follow up on what Amr was asking. Has the White House broadly considered advice for companies who are victimized by, in such incidents going forward? Is there any advice that you're considering when it comes to paying ransom in the future?
So that's a really good question. The first and most important advice is secure your systems. In this case, the ransomware that was used is a known variant. The FBI has investigated many cases of this in the past, as I noted, beginning in October. So the first and most important thing is to ensure that systems are patched and that cybersecurity is maintained at the level needed in a given network. We want to see ransomware not be successful, and that begins with greater resilience, particularly in critical infrastructure networks.
And another question, you mentioned perpetrators are usually transnational criminals. Do you have any information on whether this particular incident has any ties to Russia or other Eastern European criminals?
At this time, we assess that DarkSide is a criminal actor, but that's certainly something that our intelligence community is looking into.
Josh?
Yeah, can I ask a little bit more about DarkSide? What do we know about them? Is there any retaliatory measures that have been taken or are being considered by the U.S. In response to this or the pending investigation that you mentioned that dates back to October?
Absolutely. So I mentioned that DarkSide is a ransomware as a service variant. It's a new and very troubling variant where it's essentially provided as a service and the proceeds are split. So in that way, it's something that we're particularly troubled by. And I mentioned as well that the FBI has recently worked with international partners to take down and disrupt ransomware infrastructure. We expect that that will be a continued focus area to make it far more difficult for these actors to prey on their victims.
And even though you're treating it as a criminal act, are you saying it's state sanctioned, or is there suspicion that it's state sanctioned, or do we just don't know right now?
As I mentioned a moment ago, currently we assess DarkSide as a criminal actor, but of course, our intelligence community is looking for any ties to any nation-state actors, and if we find that further information, we'll look into it further.
You're not blaming a particular country right now for
No, we're
police
not.
runs?
David?
Thanks very much, both of you, for doing this. First, Anne, just to clarify on what you said on ransomware, the FBI has for years advised people not to pay it. I didn't quite hear you say that, so I wondered whether or not you're reconsidering the advice the FBI has given across many administrations. And both you and Liz both mentioned the concern that the ransomware may have revealed some kind of data that would then move over to the operational side, or put malware in that could move to the operational side. we don't have a lot of understanding about what that concern is. Did you see in the early parts of the investigation that there was malware on the IT side that could be moved to operational? Was it simply that they froze up their ability to bill and, move the fuel, which has been one theory, or that they simply learned information that would allow the ransomware operators to later on be able to get access to the main operational side?
Thank you, David. So I'll begin and then, of course, turn it over to Liz if she'd like to add anything. So first, thank you for highlighting the FBI has provided advice in the past that paying a ransom would encourage further ransomware activity and is so troubling. We recognize, though, that companies are often in a difficult position if their data is encrypted and they do not have backups and cannot recover the data. And that is why, given the rise in ransomware and given, frankly, the troubling trend we see of often targeting companies who have insurance and may be richer targets, that we need to look thoughtfully at this area, including with our international partners, to determine what we do in addition to actively disrupting infrastructure and holding perpetrators accountable to ensure that we're not encouraging the rise of ransomware. And to your second point regarding the concerns on the connection between the information technology and the operational technology side of a network. The operational technology side of the network is the part that actually drives control of a pipeline, for example, and as such, it is the more sensitive part. We are aware that it is the more significant part. Colonial was very careful, and one of the reasons they proactively chose to shut down the pipeline was because of concerns to manage the incident and gate the ransomware as quickly as they could.
So what I'm asking was, did you see evidence in the malware there was something that could move to the operational side?
So the Colonial incident is the private sector entity themselves. That being said, speaking to the ransomware directly, the ransomware could, of course, infect technology, whether it is on the IT side or, for example, when there's Windows-like technology on the OT side. In this case, I won't speak to details here because it's subject to an investigation, and those details are held within that investigation, but it certainly is a concern we have in the case of ransomware, and why quickly and effectively gating the spread of the ransomware is always the first area of priority.
We can do Kelly until they gotta be quick though, because we have short timeline. Go ahead.
Can you explain to us if you believe that this, since it's criminal in your judgment now, that there's a financial motive there, but do you believe that there was a desire to try to penetrate a kind of system that has such huge implications for the U.S. economy and so forth? And how does that create concern for other kinds of systems, the electric grid, whatever it might be, other energy companies? Or was Colonial just a rich target because they could financially pay potentially? Do you see this as being about the infrastructure more than just the financial incentive?
We don't